Hello, and here we are again. Today's First Fruits. Um, we would call it the day of the resurrection. Um, I want to go back to something in Exodus that we didn't discuss yet, and it's something that we really need to consider, and then we will consider uh, First Fruits in and of itself. But what we need to look at is Exodus 12:17 says, "And you shall guard the festival of unleavened bread. For on this day I brought your divisions out of the land of Egypt, and you shall guard this day throughout your generations, an everlasting law." Okay, so Pesach, we should guard it. What does that mean? The word used for guard in both of these cases is the word shamar, that means to guard. It also means to keep, but it means to treasure and to preserve. So this is a day that we need to treasure and a day that we need to preserve. And this is why it becomes so important that it be something that we remember to do, because it is a reminder for us of not only taking a look at ourselves and our relationship with our Elohim, but also as a reminder that Yahuwah Elohim made a way for us to be redeemed, delivered, and restored back into a relationship with Him, and that He also made a way to restore the kingdom of the heavens. In other words, He restored Himself as king over us, and He also restored the relationship between the earth and the heavens. In other words, the realm of the Adam, that's you and I, to get away from this idea that Adam was the name of the first guy. Um, Adam as a word, in the Torah, up until about the fourth chapter, it's always Ha-Adam, the Adam. In other words, Adam is a word that means humankind. He doesn't become Adam the guy until about the fourth chapter of Genesis. But everything that happens at Passover happens to restore Adam, you and I, back to a relationship with Yahuwah, who is Elohim. And today is first fruits. In other words, today, if we consider the day that Yahusha would have risen, okay, how is that important? He arose as the first fruit of the resurrection. In other words, there is a way now that we too are not confined to the grave, but we're also lifted up into or back to um, our Elohim in the world to come. So um, when we talk about resurrection, what was resurrected? What was lifted up? What was brought back in this day of first fruits? What was brought back was the restoration of the house of Israel, was the first thing that we have to consider. That they had strayed away, and that there was no way for them to come back, because as the divorced wife, something would have to happen. Yahuwah Elohim could not take them back because He made rules in the book of Leviticus. So part of the death of Yahusha is that as He was a full representation of the Father, He was the fullness of Elohim, that when He died, the will of the Father also died. In other words, the son could now redeem the divorced bride and bring her back into the household. Okay, so as the son, he could do this. As the son, he could do this, and therefore the house of Israel could now be redeemed, and the two houses of Judah and of Israel could now come back and become whole again. Okay, so this was one of those first fruits of the resurrection. Um, Restored the kingdom back to Elohim, and he restored the priesthood back to Melchizedek. So, three things that occur within the festival of unleavened bread, or what we call Pesach. Okay, um, so it's a day that we must be aware of what happened. Now, something that we didn't talk about was the Last Supper, things that occurred in the Last Supper, the bread, the wine. Okay, this is a marriage ceremony, and there are um, 4 or 5 cups of wine that are drank. Okay, the first cup is when the bride, or when the groom would come to the bride's house, and he would knock. And if the bride would open the door and let him in, then the groom and his family would come in, and they would all eat together, and they would have the first cup of wine together. And this is why in Revelation he says, I come to the door and I knock. If you open the door, I'll come in and eat with you. Okay? So part of Passover is our willingness to open the door for the groom and let him in. The second cup of wine would be the cup that the fathers would sit together and discuss the ketubah. In other words, the marital contract. Okay, um, what were the rules of the marriage? And we have a ketubah. It's called the Torah. It's called the Bible. So the second thing that we consider on Passover is our willingness to live according to the marriage contract. And in a wedding, in a typical Hebraic wedding, um, the groom would read the ketubah to his bride to be, and if she accepts, then she would sign the ketubah, and the groom would sign the ketubah as well. Okay, the third cup would be the cup between the families. They would all get together and they would drink together, and this cup of wine would signify the covenant relationship between the families. The fourth cup, okay, the fourth cup, which is the final cup. I said 5, but it's 4. Is the cup between the bride and the groom. This is the cup that Yahusha would share with the disciples. He said, take this and drink it. It's my blood. It's my life. Okay? People would understand what he was saying. He was saying, as the groom, I promise to give you my very essence in this relationship. And if the bride accepts it, then, and she drinks it, she enters into a relationship where she promises also to give everything that she has to her husband. Okay, we have something in that Paul says, wives, be in submission to your husband. Ooh, we all want to get into singing that Rolling Stones song, Under My Thumb. But the word for submission is ana. Actually, what it says is, wives, dedicate yourself to the care of your husband. Why? Because Something else that's offered is the bread. Okay? When the husband offers the bread to the bride, okay, he's saying, I promise to provide for you. I promise to sustain you. I promise to make sure you have a roof over your head, that there's food on the table, the bills are paid. I promise to pay your Neiman's card. Um, and if the wife accepts that, then she is accepting that the husband will take care of her, will provide for her. But at the same time, in taking that bread, she also promises to dedicate herself to the care of her husband. Now, going back to the cup of wine between the husband and the wife, this is the cup that you see wrapped up in a napkin and placed on the ground, and the bride and the groom support each other. He puts his foot on it traditionally, she puts her foot on top of his traditionally, and together they crush that final glass. The reason behind that is that they are making a statement. No one else will drink from this cup. This is the cup of our covenant. So, Passover, when we consider this Last Supper that we read about in Brit Hadashah, it was a marriage ceremony between Yahusha and his Talmudim, and basically it was a marriage contract, since we are called to remember Passover, not just as an exodus from Egypt, but now we are reminded on Passover that if we accept the wine and we accept the bread, that we are in a marriage covenant with Yahuwah Elohim by and through Yahusha. Okay? So what does that mean? It means that it's the first step in moving forward in the relationship. Remember, we discussed the first aspect of self-examination, and this is where self-examination begins, is on Passover. Now, as today is first fruits, today is the day that we recognize our relationship with our Elohim. We recognize that we are restored. We recognize that we are the first fruits of a resurrection, of a restoration that's taken place, that we have been redeemed from slavery. Again, we talked about it in the last couple of things where Judas Iscariot is given the 30 shekels of silver to turn over Yahusha. And then when things don't go the way he wants, he throws the 30 shekels of silver back at the high priest. 30 shekels of silver was what it was to redeem a slave. Okay, so we have been redeemed from slavery. And we've been redeemed from the slavery of the grave. But we've also been redeemed from the slavery of ourselves if we choose a relationship with our Elohim. The blood part, again, we talked about this. The blood that Yahusha shed was necessary to restore a covenant that had been lost between Yahuwah Elohim and the Adam. Okay? The blood restored the house of Israel back into a covenant relationship with Elohim. Remember in Galatians, we read that the circumcised would not profit from Messiah. In other words, the house of Judah was already in covenant, okay? But they needed the 30 shekels of silver to free them from the bondage of their slavery. So Yahusha brought the house of Israel and the house of Judah back together. And now we have the prince, okay, has been restored. He's been lifted up. He is Nasi. This is what we read in Ezekiel, that the prince now can minister to the people of the land. And we take this back in when we read in Shemot 19, that if you will hear my voice, if you will shamar, guard, treasure, preserve my covenant, then you will be a special treasure to me. But you will be a nation of Kohanim. You'll be a nation of teachers, a nation of ministers, and you will be Kodesh. Okay? You will be set apart to a specific purpose. And the specific purpose is to minister to the people of the land. Okay? So, first fruits. Yahusha has risen. Yahusha has gone to the Father. And Yahusha presents now the ketubah to our Elohim and says, it is finished. Okay? The job of restoration that was laid out in Bereshit 1:1, that the tabernacle, the presence of the tabernacle, would have the authority, according to the truth, power, and the ability of Yahuwah Elohim, to restore a covenant, to bring the heavens and the earth back together, has been accomplished. It's been fulfilled. So, but it's not over. Passover is just the beginning for us. We have a number of feasts and festivals over the next 6 months, 8 months that we have to pay attention to. Passover is where we promise to be in the relationship. Now we have the counting of the Omer that has begun. And for the 50 days, we will look at ourselves, we will examine ourselves, we will find out what we need to change before we come to Shavuot. Shavuot, Pentecost. Shavuot is when the Torah was given, but it's also when the Ruach HaKodesh fell in the upper room. Okay? The upper room. We have to consider the correlation between the upper room and the ark that Noah built. The ark had a bottom, middle, and upper floor. The upper floor contained the window that brought in the light. We look at this as 3 levels. The first one is knowledge. The second one is wisdom, how to apply that knowledge. The third one is understanding. Okay? And when we understand, we're in the presence of the light. So when we're in the upper room, is because we've come to an understanding, and the Ruach comes in through the window, the Spirit of Yahuwah Elohim, and it dwells within us, and it surrounds us, where we become aware that it is within Him, within Yahuwah Elohim, that we live and move and have our existence. Okay? So these next 50 days before Shavuot arrives, we're examining ourselves to find out where we are in our relationship. What do we have to fine tune? What do we need to be aware of? How can I become a more suitable vessel for the Ruach of Yahuwah? How can I become a more what is it that I'm trying to say? How do I become a better partner, I would say? How do I become a better bride? By learning what the Father's instruction is. This is a time of Torah study. It's a time of reading the Bible and getting to know what it is to be in a relationship with my Elohim, so that when Shavuot comes, I'm prepared to enter into that relationship with my Elohim. What's after this? We come to Yom Teruah. We've kind of goofed this one up and we call it Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and we eat apples and honey and blow shofars and everything. But in the Torah, Leviticus 23, it talks about Yom Teruah. Yom Teruah is a time where we dedicate ourselves to deep study and contemplation, to take a really, really good look at ourselves and what we really, really need to change. We've made the promise. We've made the promise at Passover. We've studied and self-examined ourselves and are now able to be a willing vessel for the Ruach HaKodesh and be fully involved in this relationship. Now at Yom Teruah, we truly take another look at ourselves, because we have to find out if we are holding on to any golden calves in our lives. Can I let go of those golden calves? Because shortly after Yom Teruah comes Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. It's the day that I have to humble myself before my Elohim and be able to answer the question, where are you? I have to know where I am. Then from there, then from Yom Kippur, we move forward to Sukkot. Um, the coming of Yahusha, the birth of Yahusha, the first day where Yahusha would have been born in a tabernacle, okay? And on the 8th day of Sukkot, it's called Hoshana Rabbah, the Great Redemption. He would have been taken to the temple where he would have been circumcised, and his name would have been given Yahusha. Yahuwah has redeemed. Yahuwah has delivered. Yahuwah has restored. And we enter into the world to come. Okay? So we're at step 1 of the process. Today, Firstfruits. Today is the day that Yahusha rose, but it's also a day that we should contemplate where we are and be willing to offer ourselves to our Elohim as the first fruits of that resurrection as well. Say, yes, I am fully invested in this relationship with you, and I really, really want to move forward in my relationship with you, my Father. And I really, really want to be that Proverbs 31 woman. I want to be the bride, the wife that really, really takes care of her husband's business. So that is our little lesson for First Fruits. Might want to listen to it a few extra times. I'm sure it's been a long day, and I'm really, really tired. So hopefully I got it out in some semblance of making sense. But again, I love you all. I look forward to where we can actually do this together. And I'm hoping that we can meet again for the second Passover in May. Thank you. I love you. We'll see you later. Goodbye.